are now watching the College Baseball Insider Show.
He's behind him. This is hammered. Left field, and we are tied. Wow.
Now, here are your hosts, giving you an inside look into the top matchups.
Well, week 5 in the books. Like I told Smitty, I was going to update the intro, and lo and behold, he's sitting this one out tonight.
I know.
Yeah, thanks. The little post-editing video done by me because I was too cheap to pay $5 or $75 to go back in and do it. But there you go.
It works.
Week 5 in the books. We'll talk about our betting record here in a minute, but we've got a lot of movement in the top 25. Arkansas stays put at number 1 after a total beatdown of Missouri, which was supposed to happen this past weekend. Up in Fayetteville, Oregon State at 2, Vandy at 3. Vandy looked really good, and I feel like I've been really down on the Commodes, but they took care of business against this salty Auburn team. But outside of the top 3 that I just hit on, does anything else really stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt, like you said, they really took care of business. I know for a fact, I talked about that on the show, about how we would find out a lot about both Auburn and Vanderbilt. Can Vanderbilt's offense continue their consistency? And obviously the answer in hindsight was yes. And then Auburn, they were in a big test of, are they for real, or are they kind of going to settle back down to maybe realistic expectations? And that answer was also yes. I thought one of the best series, just kind of running down the top teams, was I thought Florida-Texas A&M was a really good series. I thought all 3 games were entertaining. And I thought the Sunday game was excellent to have a good pitcher's duel and then one late. Obviously, we have to note Florida State literally unranked last week up to 12. They just look dominant. And you just have to tip your cap. As much as I hate Florida State and Miami, both teams looked really well this weekend. TCU, number 2 team in the country at one point, all the way down to 18. We mentioned NC State. They were kind of 13-14, completely drop out. Texas, we kind of knew was going to drop out. Texas Tech really was surprising to lose that series to Baylor. I thought it was going to be a clean 3-0 sweep, and boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, let's talk about NC State for a second, because I could not believe that Georgia Tech was such a short price every single game. If not, I think they were minus 105, which is really your underdog in college baseball. And then I still don't think they ever got above minus 115, and I hammered them all weekend.
I think Georgia they were plus money at one point.
Georgia Tech was just far and away the better team, and I know NC State played that one close. Georgia Tech had to come back. I think it was game 2. But overall, I mean, gosh, Georgia Tech looked like they should have been a minus 140, 150 favorite all weekend long in the books, never adjusted their odds.
Yeah, I'm kicking myself in the foot for not jumping on that. It was one of those teams series that I wanted to see if NC State would, how they were. Because I kind of had a middle of the row in the preseason guide, and I think I was pretty accurate. I think they're middle of the row. But I definitely missed the boat on Georgia Tech. I thought they were going to be in rebuild. They had like 30-something transfers come in, along with the freshman class, and man, they're just putting it together. And I got to jump on them sooner here, because I think the odds are going to start correcting themselves as the weeks go on, and Georgia State continues to win. So if you didn't jump on like me, we got to get them in week 6, because I think by week 8, they're going to be a pretty heavy favorite, matchup dependent.
Yeah, I'm going to look at, just out of curiosity, what their odds are. So anything else stick out? Virginia Tech makes an appearance in the top 25. I have not followed them really at all.
They can hit really well. Yeah, really hit really well. Their Friday night starter actually is from right down the street from where I live. Brett Renfro, he's doing really well as a true freshman. Doesn't pitch like a true freshman by any means. He looks like he's a poised sophomore or a junior. So that, kudos to them. And then let's look at number 17, Oklahoma. They had that run in 2022. A lot of people thought they were going to beat Ole Miss. Obviously, Ole Miss takes care of business. Last year, major drop-off in Norman. And this year, they're back in it, man. They looked really good against TCU. Very competitive. It just looks like a different team from last year. So they definitely caught my eye.
Yeah, so Georgia Tech is still 100-1 on DraftKings. This team's sitting at 15-4, 3-0 in the ACC. They've got North Carolina up next weekend, which should be a good series as well. But again, if Georgia Tech's going to be plus money, which I feel like they probably will be at North Carolina, outside of maybe Friday night or Thursday night with Folger Boas going, I like this Jackets team to continue to roll. The offense,
Absolutely.
super impressive. All right, we've got our first comment. Talk Clemson to me, Mills.
Yeah, they performed. I said it on the show. I was curious if Duke would kind of lull themselves into this series after an emotional series last week against Wake Forest, and that's what happened. I thought Duke has, I think Duke has the pitching advantage at least 2 out of 3 games, but outside of Friday, you couldn't tell that Saturday or Sunday, and the bats just simply fell asleep. And kudos to Clemson. You could tell they were prepared for it. It was their first, big series. I probably should have taken that for a little more account than I did, knowing Duke had already played a big series. So tip my hat to Eric Backage's team. They went to Durham and took care of business.
Yeah, they looked really good too. Hats off to them for beating Duke in that series. All right, so best bets recap. If my math serves me correctly, which was a joint effort by Q and I, so I'll blame him too. But we went 14-11, not by any means our best Friday night. Puts our Friday night bets to 55-20. No, sorry. See, that was before
That was
this.
last week.
69-31. Nice. So
69%.
we're still doing decent. Smitty, I wish he was here to just really go in on Wake and everybody else that
Indiana,
he had.
South
But
Carolina.
it's a very Christmas tree looking board. JP, thanks for tuning in.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so 3 up, 3 down. Be a little different without Smitty here, but I've got to give props. Mississippi State, you took care of business against LSU. Win 2 out of 1, and it wasn't close in the 2 games. They won 10-4 on Friday night. They played in a very close 9-8 game on Saturday, and then won 15 and 15-5 in that last day rubber match. So hats off to the Dogs. You took care of business. And then my down is Georgia. I lost. What is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I went back to the well with them. They still couldn't beat Kentucky. I don't know what was going on with them this weekend, but just absolute no-show. Charlie Condon, I don't even know what his stat line did, but they didn't win, so I don't really care. Georgia's way down now. I thought this was a sneaky team in the SEC that could make some noise, and they still could, but their pitching staff showed just they're not it. So there's my 3 up or my up and down. I'll let you go into yours.
I go with Florida. I think it's justified here that they had a lot of question marks, especially coming off of a midweek loss to Florida State, where they had again starting pitching issues as well as bullpen issues, and Kevin O'Sullivan got the boys to bounce back. Brandon Neely pitched a 3-inning save Friday night. He looked fired up, and then Cade Fisher. We were talking via text when he gave up that 3-run shot. I felt bad for him because you could see Jalen Guy camps under it like it's a routine pop fly, and then all of a sudden he gets on his horse. It just got caught in a jet stream. There's nothing you can do about that. You threw a good pitch. It just bad luck happens. But I like that Sully kept him in, and it almost seemed like in the 4th inning that Cade started to realize that he didn't get pulled. He is the Friday guy. Sully trusts him. And it was like you saw last year's pitcher again. I mean, he mowed down the 4th, 5th, and I think he had two guys get on in the 5th, but kept them out of scoring. And then in the 6th, I mean, he mowed them down, and he just had that swagger. He was prancing around, strutting on the mound, and the ball had a lot more life, and it just seemed like he was kind of reinvigorated, and maybe that's what he needed to kind of get through. I don't think the stat line really indicates the kind of start he had. You take that one swing away, and he only gives up 3 earned runs, and that would have been incredible against powerhouse A&M. And then Brandon Neely, same thing, had that swagger that he's been missing all season long, and then on Sunday he throws 2 innings. Neely does, says he has a little bicep soreness. Sully said it's nothing to worry about. he puts Luke McNeely, the true freshman who's struggled this year, in, and he gets a huge save for them, a series win. I think the confidence level of Florida coming in next week, especially against a vulnerable LSU team, is going to be sky high. Obviously, there's different teams, but the same vengeance from last year. Let's handle business and let's kind of show them we're the better team. And then Cags again. I mean, that's 3 incredible starts. It looks like his offseason changes in his mechanic are permanent changes, and it looks like it's working. And then my down. TCU, man, everybody, shout out the Lupton Drinking Club. They postponed their show so they could have some sorrow moment, a little moment of silence. So we respected that. But they got some problems. Their starting pitching is just not panning out. The bullpen's still giving up runs, and I don't know what happened to the offense. I mean, they were mowing home runs over the wall like it was nobody's business, and then now they're just struggling to score at all. So they've got some real problems right now early on that they got to fix. They can get it done. They have the team to do it. They've just got to find that reset button and hit it sooner than later before it kind of gets a little too far ahead of themselves.
Yeah, and I feel like we've said it multiple times now. They were due for regression. I mean, there were several games that they should have lost. They didn't. They had some magic on their side, and now that magic seems to have run out, and they're probably going to lose a couple games that they really shouldn't lose, but that's how baseball is. I mean, there's 60 games. There's no reason to be afraid if you're a TCU fan. I feel like you're fine. You're going to grow from it and move on, and hopefully you can catch that magic again. So we'll split up. You can talk about Vandy, and I'll talk about Wake for Smitty real quick if you can get into Vandy.
Vanderbilt, I mean, Tim Corbin, he struggled offensively last year. They did bring back majority of the guys. They're definitely swinging better. That was kind of my main take on this Vanderbilt team heading into the season. We knew pitching was going to be their strength. It stayed their strength. They're definitely as advertised. They've got probably 5 starters, and unfortunately you can only throw 3, and they're working their magic. But, they took care of business with Auburn. I was surprised that it was a sweep. I thought Auburn would have got 1, but I think we also, not to take away from Vandy, but I think we learned a lot about Auburn. They're just not quite there yet outside of Alsup, and then Gonzalez is just trying to figure out his mechanics, and it's going to take time. It just is what it is. But very impressive showing for the Commodores, and we'll see if it continues.
So JP said more likely to bounce back from a bad conference opening weekend, TCU or Wake. And I feel like this is a very good question. The benefit that TCU has, they're playing,
I think, weaker competition overall.
I just had it in front of me and then I lost it. So Wake Forest has Louisville. If you can't beat Louisville, I mean, come on, sound the alarm. You've already started now dropping your first 2 ACC series. TCU gets Oklahoma State. I mean, they should be able to handle Oklahoma State. That's not the Oklahoma State team of old. This is just not a very good team. They just lost 2 out of 3 to UCF, who was on my down last week. UCF was terrible, but still early. We'll see.
Well, and I know his stat numbers aren't really showing, but I think the Nick Kurtz injury is gonna hurt Wake Forest here for a couple weeks. I mean, just his presence alone, I think defensively he's one of the better in the league, and his leadership, and at some point he's going to turn his stat line around, but right now you're not going to have him, and I think that's going to hurt.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get into our SEC series pick'em. I'm currently your champ, but it's nothing really to write home about. It's early.
Biggest thing for all of them.
Biggest thing to me, I'm going to start at the bottom since we've already talked about A&M Florida, but Ole Miss, I mean, they came to play. They take the series 2 out of 3 against South Carolina. They didn't win that last game, right? I think I turned it off, but
South Carolina won, yeah. I believe.
That's what I thought. But, I was down on Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Both of them get big series wins this weekend. Granted, Mississippi State's was more impressive. That's why they were my up. But if I had to pick a close second, it would be Ole Miss. I mean, did you see anything outside of South Carolina just really struggling against a mediocre Ole Miss team?
Just can't hit.
Yeah.
Right now they're not hitting it. Like, I thought the pitching, I mean, they didn't give up an enormous amount of runs, and I thought, every time I was looking at the score, it was, Ole Miss only had 3 or 4 runs in the 7th, and South Carolina was definitely within reach of being able to take all of the games, and they just couldn't get the offense going, and that was the problem against Clemson. Last year they were smoking the ball. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about, the ball's maybe a little different this year. The ball's not, those routine pop flies aren't going over the fence, and maybe that's hurting South Carolina right now. They've got to figure it out, and they're not hitting in clutch situations. But I've noticed in baseball in general, man, there's just a lot of keeping the bat on the shoulder. It's not just South Carolina. When you got two strikes and you work a 1-2 count to a 3-2, at some point you got to swing. Umpire's not going to just continue to call close balls your way, and if he gives you 1 or 2. You're probably not getting that third one, so you got to swing. And I did see that a few times for South Carolina, and you just can't go down like that.
So we'll talk about my Arkansas Razorbacks. They took care of business against Missouri. Thought it was going to be a 3-game shutout. It wasn't. They win 8-0, 6-0, and then 9-1. Really turned on the offense when they needed to, but they also didn't just run away with it like I thought that they could have.
Those were late scores, too. Late scores.
13-game win streak for the Hawks. And then they go on the road to the Plains at Auburn this coming weekend. So that's going to be a good test for us. I feel like pitching always travels well, so I'm not real worried about our starting rotation. That looks to be the best in the country. In Missouri, just, I don't know. They're a sad program. But
yeah,
that was the only one.
We got
the only one where we were all in unison on with the series sweep. So for those that don't know the SEC series pick'ems, who we're awarding 3 points for correct series predictions. So that's why I've got 7. I've got Florida, who won their series 2-1, and then the little broom indicates the sweep. And we got Arkansas, and then Vanderbilt. We picked the winner, but only Smitty called the sweep. So shout out Smitty. Anything on Arkansas?
Pitching showed up. I thought the offense could have performed a little better. They scored a lot of those runs later in the game, and that was my concern heading into it. And I still think the offense to this point, it could change, but to this point, it's still slightly concerning.
Liam, thanks for tuning in. Good question. Do you think Texas A&M will tail off?
Who's their next series?
Their next series is against Mississippi State. So, and they
home
host
or away. Oh, they host?
Yep. So I feel like this is a get-right spot. Jim Schlossnagle isn't really the type of coach that I feel like he's going to let, one series loss get them down. I mean, they're still a very good team. They were undefeated. That's not something that you can continue throughout the season. You're going to lose at some point, especially in the SEC. So I feel like this is a good rebound spot for them, as well as, we just saw Duke. They get a big series win against Wake and then turn around and lose the series the next weekend. So I feel like A&M could do the same thing. Mississippi State coming off the big series win against LSU. Got to go on the road, College Station, a pretty tough atmosphere, I feel like, to play in. So I think A&M responds well this weekend, gets a series win.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want people to think that A&M played poorly this weekend, because I thought they pitched pretty well and I thought they hit pretty well. I just thought Florida showed up and was focused, and that's what was expected. If you're an A&M fan, I thought you guys played pretty well this series, and like you said, Mississippi State coming off an emotional win for the series that they probably shouldn't have won, and now you have to travel on the road. I think A&M will be just fine.
So we covered LSU, Mississippi State, Auburn, Vandy. One we didn't talk about and we were all wrong on was Tennessee, Alabama. And I thought Bama could easily win the series, especially if they took game 1. But, I mean, I got to give it to the Crimson Tide here. They looked really good this weekend.
As advertised. Man, if they could have just kept Luke Holman, watch out. That team could have been a top 5 team. I mean, just what they're, and obviously Colby Shelton would have been huge for them. But, Alabama's at advertised, and Tennessee, man, I thought they were going to roll when they beat Ben Hess. They looked very good. They kind of controlled that game. And I don't know. I think I think Tennessee. Who's Tennessee have next?
Let me look up. Rob Vaughn is a great coach. I agree.
Excellent
He's
coach
done
out of
really
Maryland.
well.
He turned Maryland around, and good job.
Tennessee
Tennessee,
has Ole Miss.
they host them.
Yeah.
They got to win it. I mean, Ole Miss, kind of same thing. You got to go on the road. I think Tennessee will be just fine. I didn't think pitching was horrible. I thought the offense just kind of fell asleep a little bit, and they were hitting the ball lights out, so it was kind of due. But I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, Alabama loses game 1 with Ben Hess. I thought there's no way they win that series, and then they win game 2 and game 3 to close it out. And I agree. Tennessee, much of like last year, they didn't have the timely hitting at moments of the game where they really needed a big swing, and now they've got the firepower to do it. There's really no excuse, but they just didn't have it. JP said if balls aren't juiced, Omaha will be even more pitchy dominant. Yeah, that's something we talk about year in and year out. I feel like with Omaha is pitchers always have more success there.
Well, I think not only that, I think it's gonna, if your team can hit home runs, it's gonna be even more meaningful out there. You're really gonna have to drive the ball with some power, and there's a lot of teams that are gonna have that advantage, and a lot of teams that aren't. And I'll tell you what, man, Coastal, they've got the power, and I know they're not on this sheet, but they're a Cinderella pick for I think all three of us, and they could thrive out in a place like that because they have just as much, if not more, power than most teams in the country.
Yeah, Liam, we talked about it on our preview show. AJ Russell, they said that he tweaked something. He had some soreness in his arm or shoulder area, side something. But yeah, he pitched 2 innings. I think he had 2 strikeouts and had 40 pitches through those 2 innings. So he may have been on a short pitch count with Tennessee's bullpen. I could see why they, would try to save his arm, especially with the other starters that have stepped up and played really well, like AJ Causey.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Mike said, "Do we think FSU has what it takes to win the whole thing?" I don't know. I'm not ready to buy into them. I do think they're going to have some regression, as do any team that's on a huge streak like this. But I mean, right now, I feel like the ACC is really competitive, and they have just as good of a chance as anybody to win it. I mean,
They've got the pitching. Yeah, they've got the hitting. What I want to see is if they get punched in the mouth, does it fold like it did last year? It could, and I wouldn't be surprised. But it also, they could swing back and be just fine. They've got the coach to turn them around. I didn't think they were going to be this good this early. I thought they were going to, I think they had 20 wins last year. I thought they'd kind of get to that 30, 32 mark. And they're obviously way ahead of that pace. So it'll be interesting to see once they lose, Mike, to kind of answer that question, how they respond.
They're 4th in the country in OPS. That's pretty impressive. The ACC loaded. Number 1 is Virginia Tech in OPS. 2 and 3 are Georgia, Tennessee, then Florida State, Georgia Tech to round out the top 5. I mean, we've got a loaded ACC, and then you look at the pitching staffs.
UVA's hitting really well.
Duke's pitchers are great. Wake Forest, I mean, you can't count out Chase Burns any day.
Yeah.
So I feel like the ACC is going to be a lot like the SEC this year, where the teams just cannibalize each other. So you can't really put a whole lot of stock in what their record is at the end of the season, but rather who they've played and who's clicking on all cylinders at the right time. I mean, those are typically the teams that make a deep run in the playoffs. So we'll see, but still early. Feel like if you want to throw a little pizza money on a Georgia Tech or Florida State, still, I think DraftKings, you could still get pretty good odds on them. So it may be worth a look. Georgia, Kentucky, we talked about. Kentucky, hats off to y'all. I wonder if eye test analytics is going to be high on Kentucky again. I know we made an enemy out of him last season. He had Kentucky rated pretty highly.
I think they were like 3rd in the country.
Yeah, didn't pan out.
Point. Yeah.
A&M, Florida, we hit on. So, guys, I appreciate the comments in the chat.
Yeah, keep them coming.
231 people viewing.
Share it. Tell your neighbors. Tell your wife. Tell your kids.
go
family
back to this
atmosphere.
top 25 here. Just kind of close it out. Make sure there's no other questions popping up. But yeah, a lot of shakeup. Should be a good week. I think a lot of the games start Thursday this coming week. So we'll probably come to y'all Thursday during the day or Wednesday night, just depending on lines coming out. Got one more here, Ryan. Early thoughts on DBU, Oklahoma, Coastal, NC State tomorrow.
I think Coastal bounces back. I'll start with them. I think, they got their loss. They had a 14-game win streak. I think they subconsciously knew a loss was going to come. They got it out of the way. This is obviously, in their eyes, a big game. It's kind of the Carolina teams, man. They like to control that it's like a little mini rivalry between all of them and kind of like a little circuit. And I think Coastal is going to handle business. And then I'll let you take Dallas Baptist in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma came off a big series win over TCU. I feel like they probably regress, but midweeks I try to stay away from them. The dog seems to typically be the play, especially just because you never know the pitching staff, who they're going to throw out there. So I go offense, and you don't really get much better on offense than DBU and Coastal. So those would be my early leans, but I may not play them.
Earlier in the season, Dallas Baptist beat Oklahoma for what it's worth. So,
well, we'll be back later on this week. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you later.
that's good to have 2:30 again.